So, what do you do then with that body? It can no longer occupy the traditional positions, which is why I'm so upset about the blockwork in the front. I'm not actually that upset. I think they're going to move it, but it's got to somehow work in an active way within the architectural spaces that it finds itself. And it's got to do it in such a way that actually all of those certainties, the Kantian projections, there was this wonderful moment in the 18th century where the realization of our spatial relationship to immediate and distant environments was always a projection of subjective experience. So when we talk about in front, behind, left, right, up, down, those are all bodily perceptions that are then projected onto space at large. Now, is it possible to undermine the certainty of that by using the body not in its traditional place, but at the very most useless part of the room? The place where you're sent when you're naughty. I spent a lot of time in the corner. And can we use, in a way, the whole space of the room as the space of the viewer? In other words, this is a complete reversion of the normal figure-ground relationships within, say, a Renaissance painting. And it's also a reversion of the kind of, the idealization of the position of art, where you might find in a room like this a plinth with a unique object made of marble or bronze. So here are these iron things, solid, 700 kilos, stuffed into the four corners of a room, and you the viewer, are allowed, as it were, to occupy a frame that has been proposed by the work. Now, I'm hoping that as a result of this, and maybe the previous slide is a better slide to look at for this thought experiment, that your certainty about up, down, left, right, front, back, in other words, your certainty about this room's position in space begins to be undermined. And you begin to get a feeling of vertigo and begin to get a sense that maybe this room is not fixed. As we know, nothing is fixed, from electrons going around a nucleus through to our position as a planet in space. We are spinning around the axis of the world at 1,000 kilometers. We are moving around the sun at 850 kilometers a second. We are expanding out into space to dimensions inconceivable. Anyway, that idea of decentralizing, de-idealizing the position of the body in art is exactly what this is about. So, if that was all about testing the, in a way, false stabilities of architecture and indeed the imposing conditions of architecture, is it possible to work directly with architecture in order to make architecture itself reflexive? And that's what this experiment was. This is a pavilion. We called it a pavilion. It's difficult to call a 600-ton structure a pavilion, perhaps. But anyway, it is a pavilion, and we had to call it a pavilion to get planning permission. I mean, it is actually a sculpture, and it's called a sculpture for the subjective experience of architecture. You have 3 blocks of 100 cubic meters. This one is solid. They're made in planks. This has been then filled. And you go in through a doorway. You have to imagine the doorway at the back here. Turn right, go up some steps, turn left, go up onto a landing and up some further steps, and you arrive at this point here. This is a further 100 cubic meters with 2 walls missing. And the third is a vertical piece that hangs just off the ground with a spiral staircase in it. And from there you look out above the tree canopy to the Baltic and to the horizon created by the sea. You could think of these 3 spaces in that this is the cave or the tomb, this is the stage or the balcony, or in a way the containing box, but it's been opened up. And this is the tower. But what I wanted to do, we had to, because of, you can see there's no balustrade on the balcony, we had to make sure that people went in ones and twos. And what I wanted to do was in some way allow for the passage of the viewer, the experiencer, to be as reflexive as possible. An attempt somehow to abstract the narrative experience of architecture into something that is entirely somatic and haptic, and allows the body of the viewer again to be the figure in the ground of the art. I just thought I'd show an early work that again tests or demonstrates this testing of skins. You could say that, you know, there's this space, and then there's the space, there's the containing space, and between them we have, as it were, this condition of containment. This is a hand-sized object. It's 42 bowls, each beaten successively, one inside the other, out of lead. I think of this as, it's almost like a Ptolemaic model of the universe, but it also suggests, I think, something that's been very important to me. It's not just a matter of testing the identity of an object. It's also about testing its context and testing its skin, and asking questions about where things begin and end. So this is the same investigation applied to the place of the human being. I don't know if you can see, but here you've got the outline of my feet. This was made in the early 80s. That has been, that idea of a skin has been repeated both internally and externally to those first footprints. It's just called floor. And in many senses, this is a reply to the privileged position of the statue, and asked for a kind of empathic inhabitation. You know, think of yourself just having got out the bath and standing on the bath mat. Maybe that's not a transcendent moment for everyone, but that idea of, in a way, a place between one state and another. This is what I came to Australia to make 2 times ago. And in a sense, this is my, I think, most sublime expression of this testing of skins and testing of human places in space. So this is Jaden Williams, a 6-year-old Wanga boy, placed about 4 kilometers out into the dried saline surface of Lake Ballard in Western Australia. The idea of isolating what I call an insider, which is a register. We registered the rather than moulding these volunteers, we registered them by scanning them and then removing 66% of the mass, but leaving them at their original height. And then placing them, there are 51 completed, I'm still hoping to complete the whole work, over a surface of about 10 square kilometers. And they hang from the horizon. If I do a quick 360, you may have difficulty with the resolution of this image, but there's one there, there's one there. I'll just go around. Now you can see from an image like this the distance between these, often shimmering in a heat haze, often uncertain as to whether is that a twig or is it a real, is that a sculpture or is it a real person. So the beholder's share here is more than simply the contemplation of an object. We have to walk. We have to walk in heat, in light, over a surface that is itself extremely responsive, and make the connection between these pieces that are never closer than about 700 meters. What's the idea of this? The idea is to render the human open and vulnerable, naked in a way that perhaps in art the human body has never been before. People have made references to Giacometti, but I don't think that's correct. These are empirical bits of archaeology in which the hidden core of a body is revealed. This is Lorraine Williams, Wangatha, and you can see maybe how we've worked. Basically, these clear ridges are indicating the section that we took right through the body, and then reduced by 66.66 recurring. And what happens? I think that what is revealed is a kind of antennae that hopefully both draws us but also transmits. You could say it's about loss, but I think it's also about recognition. It's about recognition of the relationship between consciousness and landscape. The point about this piece is that I chose the site very carefully. There's this igneous intrusion that provides a conical hill that allows you to get about 60 meters above the surface and look out over the site as a whole. And these works then become, in a sense, the axes of a mapping operation that are made, the footprints of people coming to visit. And that idea that actually this is an ongoing work in which the relational field of the works themselves is made up of our experience. We have to remember the nature, the character of the last sculpture we saw as we walk towards another, which might be a child, it might be another female, it might be a male. And we are making, as it were, these relationships. I would like to feel that what the insider does is in some way reveals an attitude that is embedded in the body. You could say that life inscribes within our bodies a certain set, a certain character of relations between limb and torso and bodies. I mean, and limb, torso, and extremities. And by simplifying them, concentrating them, and then exposing them in extreme space, what I would like to think is that we have a kind of effective map, which deals with many things, but I won't go into it. I'm looking forward very, very much to going with Vicken, who hasn't seen this, and seeing the piece again. And I'm hoping one day that we will indeed finish it. This is I think, continuation of the great story began by Walter de Maria, Michael Heiser, Robert Smithson in the open spaces of the American Southwest. But what the American psyche did not recognize was the inherent relationship between a place and human memory. And they treated, I think, if you think of Michael Heiser's double negative, he treated that landscape as if it were an empty canvas. I think what this work tries to do is recognize the fact that actually human memory cannot be dissociated from place, from the experience of place. And this is a form of reverse anthropology. You could say this is the fruits of an engagement with a local community in which the results of that investigation are not taken and placed within the learning institutions of a literate society, but returned to the land from which that knowledge was derived. This is the work that I made when I came in 1989. Tony and I drove this out to the border of South Australia and New South Wales. And this was another, in a way, attempt to think about human memory, habitation, and indeed the human condition in a very extreme spatial condition of a more or less complete 360-degree flatness, which Australia, as you know well, is blessed with a lot of. That same idea recovered in an attempt to make a labyrinthine evocation of at least 50% of humanity's present experience of space as the urban grid, a place in which you can be very close together, but also extremely far apart. Perhaps one of the things that you might have intuited from inside Australia was the importance of, in a way, not knowing where the edge of the field was, of things coming in and out of focus, of, in a sense, the provisionality of the very act of perception. And that is true of this work as well. This is another place which is now permanently sited on the mouth of the Mersey, and I think probably for most people deals most directly with issues of rising sea levels and the effects of the tipping point. This is a field about 3.5 miles long and about 1 mile out to sea. It's a very industrial beach. You can see at the top here there's a oil rig. There are very nice sewage pipes that run out to sea, and there's that rather wonderful observation tower that actually you have an even finer version of here on your harbour, and you mustn't ever let them knock it down, because they're planning to knock that down. And I think these bits of industrial architecture that so easily can be seen as eyesores are in fact incredibly important part of the history of our made environment. But anyway, what's this all about? I think this is about another form of getting art out of the ghetto, putting it into collective space, and using it as a catalyst to allow the real world to become an imagined one. The real and, from my childhood, seemingly fixed world to become porous and open and potentially changeable. So these bodies appear and disappear. These are industrially made works of man returned to an elemental condition in which time and tide are tested one against the other. And what happens within this relational field, very similarly to the relational field of inside Australia, is that in some senses you become part of the picture. The work is simply a form of acupuncture of a given landscape, a given place, in which your participation in it is somehow its fulfillment or completion or, in a way, onward life. I've tried to do similar things within architecture as well. So this is a feeling material where, again, the body is indicated as being uncertain of its position. It's leaning well out of the vertical, and it's described by a single line that does an orbit around the skin and then touches the skin of the room and then comes back into the body and does an orbit around the body. And this work, this work ended up being evolved into a work called Clearing, in which all reference to the body was lost, and it was your body entering this energy field that completely undermined, as it were, the Euclidean geometry of the room, replacing it with a kind of what I would think of as a quantic universe, in which it was all about vectors and flows, about, in some senses, a non-measurable energy field in which you could find your own place. And what interested me about that was, is it possible to begin to conceive of the space of art simply as a frame through which the viewer becomes the viewed? So if we think of Piero's Flagellation, a classic Cartesian one-point perspective painting, in which we are invited to look at the subject in this frame, is it possible to empty the frame and simply allow life as it's lived to enter it and leave it, and become, in a way, a hiatus principle that allows the viewer to become the viewed, and vice versa? The same work, it absorbs light and then emits it. In this first installation, we just had it charged by natural light, and then it would glow at night. This is now, well, it's just come down in New York, but I'm going to open a show in London using this same breathing room idea, but there'll be 15 frames. Now, each of these frames, rather like with a sculpture for the subjective experience of architecture, are a similar volume. These are all 30 cubic meters, but they are stretched in different axes. And in total darkness, this framing plays on the interface between the virtual and the real, between a drawing and an object, between a place and a thing. But it still invites exactly that inhabitation of the viewer to become the viewed for other viewers. And maybe the most extreme example of this was Blind Light, the work that I made for the Hayward 2 or 3, 2007, or was it 2008? Anyway, when was it? 7, thank you. This was again an architectural, modernist cube, 11 meters by 11 meters by 3 meters 50 high, with a threshold that was continually open. You crossed it and you disappeared, not just to yourself, but to everyone. You could hold your hand out in front of you and not see it. You looked down at your feet, you couldn't see them. And this is a man who's holding a piece of paper that says, "Those of a nervous disposition," and should not proceed further. It didn't actually stop very many people ignoring him entirely, as you can see this lady is going to do. This, in a sense, is the most dematerialized work that I've made. It's simply 7,000 lux of light and water vapor at about 1.5 atmospheres. But I think it's trying to do exactly the same thing as drawn, the 8 body forms in the 4 corners. It's trying to detach you from the certainty of where you are in time and space, so that you begin to concentrate on being itself. There's somebody who's found the edge. Obviously, this is also another kind of instrument through which the viewer becomes the viewed, or you could say the real becomes the virtual. Because as people come up towards the outer edge, so they become an appearance for others. They become, in a sense, a picture of themselves. But what I never thought would happen, I mean, I thought this was quite a tough show. It had allotment in it and the space station. The space station was in a space just in front of this and only lit by the light from blind light. But it was quite extraordinary to me how many people came and how long they were prepared to queue. They were prepared to queue for 2 or 2.5 hours, just in order to have the experience of losing themselves. Well, that's a funny thing on one hand, but it's also a very encouraging thing. I mean, to go back to my opening remarks, is it possible that the space of art can be a space in which we can detach ourselves from that world of obligation and comfort that so often catches us so completely? To finish, I just wanted to go back to where we started. The Event Horizon installation in New York that's still there. Here is the piece on the northeast corner of the Empire State. Here is the piece on the ground below the Flatiron, and here are 2 people looking up at another work that is up there, but it's not in the picture. Here is a man looking at the Flatiron and the piece on it. And there is it's a kind of Giacometti project, I suppose. This is the buildings becoming the mass of a plinth, and the works becoming these tiny antennae that somehow talk about human vulnerability in spite of, you could say, the confidence and assurance of the building on which they are supported. What happens when art gets out of its ghetto and escapes from the gallery, the private collection, the museum? I think all sorts of things begin to emerge. It is almost like, the totem released from, in a way, its sacred precinct. And people are curious and quizzical. And they ask the question, what on earth is this thing doing here? And there was this marvellous look on this man's face, the salaryman who has also been released for a moment from his office, who's looking up at his familiar environment, and it's suddenly been made strange. And he's asking, what the fuck's going on? And in a way, I hope that what the sculpture does is returns that question to him. What the fuck's going on? Thank you very much.